After what felt like a full minute, he worked up the courage to lean over and peek into the den through the second archway. When he did, the figure turned to face him. Jack, being the kind of person who sometimes acts on impulse, wanted to look. Before I could stop him, he quietly unzipped the tent just enough to see outside. He immediately covered his mouth and moved away so I could look too. It was pitch black, but what I saw is burned into my memory. Inside, everyone was still arguing and brawling like before. I was panting, wide-eyed, nearly hysterical, and I shouted, "There's a shadow!" And then it happened. A loud bang. Something slammed down on the roof, right where I had just seen it standing. The whole damn trailer shook. It was loud, violent, unreal. My dad's encounter with the Hat Man. A bit of backstory first, because I think it's relevant. My father, who passed away in 2012, was a very stoic man. He wasn't into the paranormal, the occult, or anything remotely heebie-jeebie. He didn't talk about ghosts, didn't entertain scary stories, and was quick to shut down any talk of things that go bump in the night. That's why it stuck with me so deeply when he shared one story, only one, with me in his entire life, and only mentioned it maybe 2 or 3 times before he passed. Each time he would become completely overcome with emotion. He never cried easily, but when he told his story, it visibly shook him. We're from Mobile, Alabama. Our city played a role in the Civil War, and the house my dad grew up in was built on land used during the Battle of Mobile Bay. It's in the historic district, and several of the older homes there, including theirs, had sealed tunnels in and beneath them, believed to be remnants of old slave routes or wartime structures. To make this easier to follow, here's a quick layout of the house at the time. When you opened the front door, the staircase was immediately to your right. To the left was a hallway that opened up into the living room. At the far end of that living room was my grandparents' bedroom. On the left side of the hallway there were 2 large archways, spaced about 5 feet apart, leading into a family den. Within the den was my grandfather's study, which had glass doors. Now, onto the event. When my dad was around 10 or 12 years old, he was asleep in his upstairs bedroom and suddenly woke up with a feeling of intense dread. He described it as pure despair and fear. It was so overwhelming that he got out of bed and walked downstairs, despite feeling like every step was a struggle. He said it felt like he had to force himself to keep moving. When he reached the bottom of the stairs, he could see through the first archway into the den. The den was dark, but the lights in the study were on, and that's when he saw it. He said there was a man standing in the study, but not a man in the normal sense. It looked like a shadow, not like something in shadow, but like the absence of everything, completely pitch black. No features, no detail, just a tall silhouette in the shape of a man, with the outline of a top hat clearly visible. It wasn't just dark, it was void-like. My dad, terrified, pressed his back against the wall between the 2 archways, his heart pounding in his ears. He said he couldn't move, he was frozen in fear. After what felt like a full minute, he worked up the courage to lean over and peek into the den through the second archway. When he did, the figure turned to face him. He didn't say it walked or moved, just that it turned to him. That was enough. He bolted the hallway, completely panicked. This encounter happened about a week after his older sisters had used an Ouija board in the house. Whether that's connected or not, I don't know, but he always thought it might be. Years later, after he passed and I started looking into similar experiences, I came across stories of something called the Hat Man. It gave me chills. The descriptions matched exactly what my dad described, but there's absolutely no way he could have known about that as a kid. There was no internet in his childhood, no forums, no online rabbit holes. Even when I was older, he could barely use an iPhone. He was a smart man, just not tech savvy, and not at all the kind of person to invent or believe in things like that. I fully believe he saw what he said he saw. Years later, when I was about 12, my mom, dad, and I moved into that same house for a short time after my grandfather passed. We stayed for a couple of months, but had to move out temporarily for renovations. When we moved back in, the house felt completely different. The energy had shifted, and we started having a lot of strange experiences. I'd be happy to share those too if anyone's interested. But for now, this is the story my father told, and the only paranormal thing he ever admitted to in his entire life. Creepy encounter at work. I just posted this in another sub, but I figured I'd share it here too. I work at a retail store in the UK, and if you've worked in retail, you know you get a few strange customers now and then. But this one was just flat out weird. It was a 4-hour shift, and I was only about an hour into it. Around 9 a.m., when a customer came up and asked where he could find the extension cables, he looked to be around 50 or 60 years old. But what really stood out were his eyes. They were abnormally wide and bulging, just staring at me. It was unsettling, but I brushed it off. As I started walking with him to the extension cable section, he suddenly said, "I'm an alien, so I don't know where anything is." I laughed, thinking it was a joke, but he didn't smile, laugh, or even react, just stared. We reached the section, and I showed him the options we had. I began to walk away when he asked, "What is the currency of these?" I paused and said, "What?" Because, well, who asks that? He repeated himself. I told him, "Pounds, GPB, Y." He simply replied, "Thank you, sir." Then I walked off. Weird, right? But I brushed it off again, assuming he maybe had some mental health issues or was just odd. As I continued stocking shelves, I kept seeing him walking around the store, still with that same wide-eyed stare, as if he was scanning everything. Honestly, I'm not even sure if he blinked. He still had the extension cable in his hand from earlier, just walking around slowly. My store has a balcony upstairs that overlooks the sales floor, including the garden area where I usually work. Around 11:30 a.m., so nearly the end of my shift, I looked up and saw him again. This time he was on the balcony, just standing there, staring directly at me with those same wide-open eyes. He stood like that for about 10 minutes straight. Eventually a coworker approached him and asked if he needed help, and after that I just didn't see him again. Safe to say, I was completely creeped out. The way he said, "I'm an alien," the staring, the weird questions, I honestly don't know what to make of it. Is there any kind of drug or condition that makes someone act like this? Because if not, I really don't know what to think. Terrifying camping encounter in Mississippi. I'm not sure if this is the right sub, but about a month ago I went camping in Mississippi with a friend. Let's call him Jack. Neither of us are experienced campers. We've only been a handful of times, so I wouldn't say we know exactly what we are doing. It was around 11:30 p.m., and we were in our tent, about to go to sleep, when I heard a rustling sound. We didn't think much of it at first. It's the woods, there are animals everywhere. A little time passed, and then we heard more rustling, followed by a blood-curdling scream. Jack was sure it was just a bobcat. I tried to believe him, but I'll admit, I was starting to get a little uneasy. Still, we eventually fell asleep. Then, in the middle of the night, we were both woken up by the sound of scratching and another scream. This one much closer. The scratching went on for at least 10 minutes, and it was definitely getting nearer. At this point, we were both really scared. Jack, being the kind of person who sometimes acts on impulse, wanted to look. Before I could stop him, he quietly unzipped the tent just enough to see outside. He immediately covered his mouth and moved away so I could look too. It was pitch black, but what I saw is burned into my memory. There was a creature standing about 10 feet away from us. It had to be at least 8 feet tall. The skin was pale and extremely wrinkled. Its head was balloon shaped, with huge black eyes that looked like empty holes. It had long claws, which it was using to slowly rake down the sides of the trees, making that scratching noise. Its mouth was long and thin, stretching across most of its face. It didn't come any closer, it just kept pacing around, scratching the trees, and eventually let out one final scream before turning and walking back into the woods. We left first thing in the morning. It was one of the scariest things I've ever experienced, and I don't think I'll ever go camping again. Has anyone else ever experienced something like this? Does anyone know what it could have even been? Saw a 7 foot tall shadow figure on a roof out in the boonies. Back when I was in my early 20s, this was around 2008, my girlfriend and I were visiting her mom out in Eau Gray, Michigan. She lived in a double wide trailer at the very end of a long dirt road called Manor Road. This whole area was way out in the middle of nowhere, real rural, and really close to Saginaw Bay. On the right side of the road were a bunch of old houses and overgrown canals that used to hold a good amount of water. That night, my girlfriend, her niece, the niece's boyfriend, and I went to Davos to do a bit of bar hopping. The energy all night felt off, negative. We were all arguing and not getting along. To make matters worse, my grandmother had passed away not long before, so I was already in a bad emotional state. We eventually made it back to her mom's place. Everyone went inside, but I stayed in the car, parked out in the road. I put my head on the steering wheel and just started crying, completely overwhelmed and upset. It was twilight. Light rain had just started falling. I looked up, and I swear to you, I saw it. There was a tall, blacker than black shadow figure standing on the roof of the double wide. It had to be at least 7 feet tall. The silhouette stood out darker than the surrounding twilight. It had long arms, long fingers, and two tiny white pinpricks where its eyes should have been. It was just staring directly at me, burning a hole through me. The image is seared into my brain. I'll carry it with me to the day I die. But that's not even the end of the story, not even close. I don't know how long we locked eyes for, maybe 5, maybe 10 seconds. Then I saw the porch light come on. The door opened from the opposite side of where it stood, and the moment the shadow from the open door passed across the roof, the figure vanished. I didn't think. I bolted out of the car, ran up the ramp, and burst through the front door. Inside, everyone was still arguing and brawling like before. I was panting, wide-eyed, nearly hysterical, and I shouted, "There's a shadow!" And then it happened. A loud bam. Something slammed down on the roof, right where I had just seen it standing. The whole damn trailer shook. It was loud, violent, unreal. Everyone in the room froze, dead silent. They all turned to look at me, and I just said, "Yeah, that's what I was about to tell you. There is something on the roof." Every single person in that room remembers that night like it was yesterday. So do I. It changed how I see the world. That thing was real. I know what I saw. Believe me or don't, I honestly don't care. My ex's mom has since passed, and the trailer isn't there anymore. I'm 44 years old now, but that memory, still here, clear as day. I was chased out of an abandoned building by someone or something. Back in 2018 in northern Canada, I used to explore abandoned buildings with a few friends. We weren't vandals or thieves, we never took anything or caused damage, we just liked to look around, take pictures, and enjoy the eerie atmosphere. We did this dozens of times, often at night, and despite the creepy settings, we were rarely spooked by anything. One night we decided to check out an old, abandoned military residence. Most of it was just apartment style rooms, but there were also a few recreational areas, including an indoor basketball court. While we were walking around the court, we thought it would be cool to explore the changing rooms and bathrooms. Sometimes you find unique photo spots in the strangest places. We checked the women's room first. It was empty aside from a broken mirror, nothing unusual. Next, we headed towards the men's rooms. It was as we approached the door that I suddenly got a gut feeling, that deep instinctual sense that something was off. I hadn't felt even slightly uneasy the whole night, but now I was completely on edge. I didn't want to freak anyone else out, so I kept it to myself and went in anyways. As soon as I opened the door, a foul smell hit me. That wasn't unusual for places like this, but what I didn't expect was the intense humidity. It was like someone had just taken a hot shower, but as far as we could tell, there was no running water in the building. There hadn't been any in the women's room, and we hadn't seen any active plumbing. We walked slowly into the center of the room, and the unease started to get overwhelming. I finally broke the silence, and with a slight crack in my voice, asked, "Did you want to just go?" Judging by the looks on their faces, my friends were feeling the same thing I was. And that's when it happened. The second I finished speaking, something burst out of one of the bathroom stalls. It was huge, easily taller than me, and I'm 6'4". It was completely covered in black garbage bags from head to toe. I couldn't see any part of its body. I honestly don't even know how it could see or breathe, let alone run. And the way it moved wasn't normal. It didn't run like a person. It moved in these fast, erratic, jerking motions that looked almost inhuman. We took off immediately, slipping and sliding on the wet tile as we sprinted out of the room. Thank God the basketball court was right outside and the exit was straight across from us. We could hear it chasing us the entire way, those garbage bags rustling and slapping together as it ran after us. Once outside, we ran straight to the car, jumped in, and floored it out of there. None of us said much on the drive home. I think we were all struggling to process what had just happened. As crazy as it sounds, I was so shaken by the experience that I wanted to go back. I felt like I needed closure, some explanation, but when we returned, there were now always one or two civilian vehicles parked nearby with security inside. They threatened us with arrest if we got any closer. We tried a few more times to see if the coast was clear, but security never left. Then, about 2 months after the encounter, the building was demolished. To this day, I still think about it. What or who was in that stall? Why were they dressed like that? And how did they know we were there? I don't have any answers, just a memory, and the certainty that whatever it was, I never want to run into it again. Pale white humanoid encounter in Ohio. This happened in either 2022 or 2023. I can't remember exactly. I'm located in Akron, Ohio. At the time, I worked testing gas stations, and I'd often get home really late at night. On this particular night, I arrived home somewhere between 2:45 and 3 a.m. As usual, I'd let my dogs out to go potty, and while they were outside, I set my work stuff down inside the side door of my house and came back out. Once they were done, I let them inside. But right before I followed them in, I got this overwhelming sensation that I needed to look around the corner of my house towards my neighbor's property. I don't know why, but the feeling was so strong I couldn't ignore it. So I peeked around the corner, just barely, and looked into my neighbor's backyard. That's when I saw it. There was something standing in their fenced-in backyard, right at the edge of our houses, right near the woods. It was facing the tree line with its back towards their house, which meant I was looking at its side profile. It stood around 6 to 7 feet tall, and its skin was pale white. But more than that, it was glowing, almost like it had a light shining directly on it, but it was pitch black outside. Maybe a crescent moon, or even a new moon, I don't remember, but there was no reason I should have been able to see it so clearly, and yet I could. No flashlight, no ambient light. It just seemed to illuminate on its own. The figure looked extremely human like, with no clothes on. Its body was muscular but completely smooth, pale, and glowing. It was standing motionless, staring into the woods. I was frozen, watching it in total disbelief. I didn't make a sound, I didn't even breathe too loud. But then it snapped its head towards me. It knew I was there. Its face locked onto where I was peeking from, and all I remember thinking was, run. I panicked. I ran inside my house, slammed the door shut, locked it, and just stood there shaking. I was absolutely convinced this thing was going to come for me. I don't think I've ever felt that level of pure, unfiltered fear in my life. I thought I was truly about to be taken, or worse. Since then, I've never seen anything like it again. Small humanoid sighting in Fayetteville, Arkansas. In early March of 2021, someone close to me had a strange and unsettling encounter while out on a run in Fayetteville, Arkansas. She saw something she initially believed to be a toddler, but as she processed the experience, she realized what she saw didn't quite make sense. Here's what she described: less than 3 feet tall, tan colored skin or possibly fur, no noticeable clothing or shoes, body proportions and muscle tone resembling that of a fit adult male, but at a toddler size. No noticeable hair on the head, moved very quickly, seemed to vanish or hide extremely fast. She first saw it as it ran out from between two small houses that backed onto a wooded swampy area. There's a creek and a couple of ponds in that particular part of the neighborhood. At first glance, she thought it was a naked child. Its size and lack of clothing gave that impression. For reference, she's only about 5 feet tall herself, and the figure was significantly shorter. She was running in its direction when she noticed a pizza delivery car coming down the street towards the figure. The small being ran out onto the road. She panicked, thinking a child was about to be hit by the car, and sprinted forward in fear. Thankfully, the car had already been slowing down due to a curve in the road. The small figure made it safely across the street and ran behind a wooden fence on the corner property. My friend was only about 50 feet away at this point. She had to slow down slightly to make the turn around the corner, but when she got there, the small person, or whatever it was gone. She ran around the yard and nearby area for a full minute or two, thinking maybe a child was hiding behind something, but as she was searching, it started to hit her. It had moved way too fast for a toddler. Its gait and movements didn't look like a child's at all. The proportions were off. It looked like a miniature adult, not a kid. She hadn't been able to make out any facial features. She left, feeling completely confused and shaken, unsure of what exactly she had seen. It happened quickly, but it didn't sit right with her. Even now, she can't stop thinking about it. Has anyone else experienced anything like this in the Fayetteville area or anywhere else? We'd really appreciate any thoughts or similar experiences. Unseen lanky white creature near the Everglades. Hi, I'm not really sure how to explain this, but it's been happening to me for about a year now. I never thought much of it and assumed my boyfriend was just messing with me every time he brought it up, because I have never seen it. only he had, until yesterday, when one of my friends saw it too. Now I'm kind of freaking out and seriously wondering what this could be. What they've both described is a tall, lanky, white humanoid creature with no face. They said it kind of looks like Slender Man, except no suit or tentacles, or like Voldemort but even more featureless, just blank. Every time they've seen it, it's been accompanied by a very strong smell, a mix of rotting flesh like a dead animal and mildew. They've also said it bangs on nearby objects, like our garage door, which we leave cracked for ventilation, or even my bedroom window. Sometimes you can hear it breathing heavily. It usually appears between midnight and 5 a.m. My boyfriend says he's seen it more than once. He told me it was just standing there outside, staring through the blinds of our bedroom window. He mentioned seeing white or red eyes. One time, after an encounter, we noticed there was a scratch on the inside of the window glass, but the mesh gate outside, which should have been damaged if something had touched the window, was completely untouched. What's bothering me is that I've never seen it myself. Not once. But now that two people have described the same thing with the same creeped out reaction, I'm starting to wonder what's really going on. If anyone has advice, insight, or knows what this could be, anything at all, I'd really appreciate it. I'm open to hearing theories, whether paranormal, folklore based, or even scientific. Thank you in advance. Faceless humanoid encounter between two cemeteries. Nearly 20 years ago, my best friend and I had a strange encounter that we still talk about to this day. It happened during the day in a small town in Saratoga County, upstate New York. We were walking along an overgrown path in the woods that connects the town's new cemetery to the old cemetery. It's a quiet area, and I've lived here my entire life. Nothing out of the ordinary ever happens in this town. It's safe, familiar, and I know the local wildlife well. There's no real cryptid lore in the area, although we are surrounded by some Revolutionary War and Native American history. As we were walking, maybe halfway down the path, we both suddenly noticed something just off the side, a few yards in front of us. It was a figure, partially obscured by a bush. It was tall, humanoid, around 6 feet in height. It was a light beige in color, with absolutely no defining features. No face, no hair, no visible eyes, no muscle tone, nothing. Just a vaguely human shape. Even stranger, it started moving towards us. Not aggressively, but deliberately, like it was going to step right onto the path. Neither of us said a word. We just locked eyes for a split second and then ran, full sprint back towards the car the way we came. It was pure instinct, like something inside both of us knew we needed to leave immediately. I spoke to my friend about it recently, and she told me the part that stood out the most to her, the figure's large torso. She remembered it as having no nipples and strange loose skin folds, which is something I hadn't focused on at the time, but it matches the weird, smooth, unnatural appearance I remember. We still have no idea what we saw. No one in our town has reported anything similar, and we've never been able to find an explanation. If I had been alone, I might have convinced myself I imagined it, but having someone else there who saw the exact same thing and reacted the same way makes it feel very real. If anyone has inside theories or has seen anything similar, please let me know. We've never forgotten it, and I'd love to understand what we encountered that day. Humanoids. They come in many shapes and sizes, sometimes pale and faceless, standing outside our windows in the dead of night, sometimes small and fast, vanishing before we can even question what we saw. Other times they are towering figures, shadow dark, slamming onto rooftops or chasing us from places we should not be. Across all these stories, the pattern remains the same. Beings that are almost human, but not quite. Their proportions are off, their skin too smooth, their movements too wrong. They don't fit into any known category of wildlife, and they defy the safe little boxes we try to place reality into. Maybe they are glimpses of something old, something that has always lived just outside the firelight, watching us from the edges of our cemeteries, our forests, even our backyards. Or maybe they are something new, born of the modern world and its strange places. Whatever they are, the people who've seen them will never forget. And with that, I do hope you enjoyed my narrations. But even if you didn't, I want to wish you a good rest of your day.